you get all of these particular formulas. I would say to you that these are particularly helpful. And you should know them, and if you don't, then we really need to practice with those. And I'll add another triangle here in a second. Are you guys familiar with the annotate feature of Zoom?
No, not really.
Okay. So for all of you, there should be something that says, what does it say? It says something about view video or view something. Um, it should be at the top of the screen, and is there something about that's on like a little menu? I'm looking for where it says annotate, and if I remember correctly, let me see if I get rid of mine. What is it? I'm not sure what it would look like on your side. Is there somewhere where you can find where it says annotate? There might be like a menu that has like three dots or something like that.
Yeah, we have a little annotate thing.
Okay, if you click, all three of you click on that annotate. Now, what that allows you to do is you can draw on screen right now. And when you draw on screen, I see what you draw. Um, that might be useful to you here in a minute if you want to, although some of you like paper and pencil, so you're just going to use paper and pencil. That's fine too. I totally understand that. But one of the things on that annotate bar, once you click annotate and it brings up all the drawing tools, the far right side there's one that says save. And when you click on the save button, it will actually take a screenshot of what you see on the screen. And it puts it in a folder for you. So let's suppose we're writing on screen something, or I'm writing on screen something, and I'm writing too fast for you and you don't want to copy it down. You could always hit the save button. And it will just keep pumping those screenshots into a same folder. So for instance, I'm going to say that one of the triangles you should look for, because it shows up all the time, is the special right triangle 3, 4, 5. It's called a Pythagorean triple, and sometimes it shows up differently. Sometimes they call it 6, 8, 10. In other words, any multiple of 3, 4, 5 will come into play, and somewhere in these tests you're going to find that 3, 4, 5 right triangle. And if you know how to look for it, it might make your life a whole lot easier. But as you can see, that's not listed at the beginning of the SAT for any of these tests. Now they do have the nice 45, 45, 90 and the 30, 60, 90. And if you're unfamiliar with those, we really need to kind of get familiar with them. I know that you guys studied them in geometry a lot, but they show up as well. Obviously, lots more formulas that they throw at you. One of the things that you might or might not learn about in your trig class here at the end of the year is has everything to do with this right here, this information down here at the bottom. So many of you are familiar with the number of degrees in a circle being 360, but unless you've taken pre-calc and trig, you don't know that there's another group of at the very end of Algebra 2, they teach you about, radians and the unit circle. So I'm hoping that even with our weird schedule this year, that they still will talk to you guys about unit circle. And it looks like we have somebody entering. So hopefully she gets entered. So 360 degrees, which is what you guys typically think of breaking a circle up into little pieces, is the same thing as 2 pi radians. Now, why do I bring this up? Because you will see occasionally questions that involve radians. It's not a lot, but it does come up, and so that it's basically a different measuring system. It's kind of like centimeters and inches. They both measure length, they're just different measuring systems. So being able to understand and go back and forth between those. We will talk about that more when we get to a question like that, but that's information that you have at the beginning. All of this information is what you have at the beginning of an SAT, but nothing will be given to you at the beginning of an ACT. And of course, they talk about triangles being 180 degrees, but most of you already know that. So, what I would like to do to break up the monotony of everything, typically about an hour into our class, I like to give a 5-minute restroom break so you can get up and stretch your legs, because nobody likes to hear for 2 hours. You guys have a hard enough time if you're Zoom classes. What's the longest Zoom class you guys have had for class?
Like an hour or so.
An hour? Okay. Anybody beat that? Anybody get close to 90 minutes? That's a long time if you did. It's a long time to be. So what I like to do to break things up is I like to give you guys 15 minutes to work on your own. Now, I'm going to do it a little bit differently with you guys. Now, when you're doing this test, you would get 25 minutes, okay? And it would take, but I'm only going to give you 15. You may not get all 20 questions done. The point that I'm trying to make is I want to speed you up as fast as possible. Obviously, we've got multiple choice questions that we're going to go through. And eventually, and I got to think about this, we get to non-multiple choice questions. Well, these multiple choice questions keep getting more difficult and more difficult and more difficult. But if you don't leave enough time, you won't get to these that are not multiple choice. Well, you might say to yourself, well, that's okay, I just didn't get to them. Well, some of these questions are easier than the multiple choice questions. You might have gotten some of these, but you didn't leave enough time. So I'm just trying to speed you up. Speed is the name of the game, and if I can make you go faster, I will. When we do get to the time where I'm going to give you 15 minutes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you in breakout rooms. You'll each be in your own breakout room. What I'm going to do during that 15 minutes is go from room to room to room and just kind of help you on one question, and then go to the next person, then go to the next person, go to the next person. And if you're doing fine and you don't need any help, you can tell me that. But if you've got something you're stuck on and you want help with it, fire away. And we'll just spend 15 minutes trying to, give you time to do as much work as you possibly can on the questions. And then we'll come back together and we'll work through all the questions of this test and see how you guys do. But I did want to go over the instructions that I see here because some people may not be familiar with how to fill in these grids. I know you can fill in the circles. I'm not saying you can't fill in the circles, but there are some specific rules here that are useful to you. One, it's not required that you write things in here. That's not required. They're only going to grade the circles. I think most of you would say it's kind of a dumb thing to say, mark no more than one circle in any column, because of course they're going to mark it wrong. But this is something that you might not have thought of. No question has a negative answer. So if you're working on these questions and you end up with a negative answer, that's a problem. So you might need to redo that question. So I thought that was worth mentioning. Some problems have more than one correct answer. In that case, mark only one answer. The answer could be 4, 5, or 6. Now I know that you guys don't like that because it's not an English class. We like to know that there's just one answer. But sometimes there are more than one answer. So we just have to pick one only. If I put 456, then I'll get it wrong because it thinks it's 456. Mixed numbers. If you have a mixed number, such as 3 and 1/2, you're either going to mark it down as 3.5 or you're going to mark it down as 7/2. Do not ever write it like this, 3(1)/2, because it will see that as 31/2, which is 15.5, which is the wrong answer. So make it a decimal or an improper fraction, but don't ever do the mixed fractions. Questions or number 6 here, decimal answers. If you get a decimal answer with more digits than the grid can accommodate, then you may round or truncate. Most kids, when I ask about rounding, they know exactly what I'm talking about. When I ask them what truncating is, they have no idea what I'm talking about. So let me fill you in. Suppose that the answer to the question was 2/3. One of the acceptable ways to write the answer is 2/3. But as a decimal, you know that's 0.6 repeating. It goes on forever and ever and ever. They say that you can do it either of these two ways. Now, this is called rounding. You guys are very familiar with it. This one's called truncating. And as you can see, they just chopped the decimal off and threw it away. So they will take either one of those. Let me show you an answer that they will not accept. 0.6. They will also not accept 0.66. Now, you may say to me, well, Mr. Staley, why won't they accept those answers? Because of the last statement they make here. If it is a decimal that has more digits than the grid can accommodate, you must fill the entire grid. That's why they'll take 0.666 or 0.667, but they're not going to take either one of those. So, those are some details I just thought I would point out to you. Last thing they want you to note, it doesn't matter whether you start on the left side or the right side when you're filling in your grid. They'll take the answer in either position. Any questions about the non-multiple choice? Now would be a good time to yell at me. Okay, so the goal here, I'm going to split you up into your breakout rooms, and does everybody have a digital copy in front of them, or printed copy from the test that I sent you? Okay, so you should either have a digital copy in front of you or a printed copy, whichever. But I'm going to put you in your breakout rooms, and then I'm going to come room to room to room. I want you to start with question 1. I want you to go as fast as you possibly can. I'll give you 15 minutes, and then we'll start going over all 1 through 20 to make sure to see how we did. I am going to tell you right now that there are more than one way to do these questions, some of them. And you may come up with a faster way to think through the process than I do. Do not feel bad about saying, hey, Mr. Staley, what about this? Could I do it this way? And the reason I say that, because we're trying to get as fast as possible, sometimes math teachers like to do things the algebraic way. Do you know the thing that hurts me the most is when kids say, I just plugged in the answers. Well, guess what? Sometimes that is the fastest way to do some of these questions. And I'm not going to disagree with you on some of them. So that may be a strategy that you use on certain questions, and maybe there's something else that you come up with or see that you think, oh, well, if I just do it this way, then I'll see the answer right away. Feel free to share with me, because I want to make sure we do things as fast as possible so we can help everybody think through things quicker. Okay, I'm going to put you in your breakout rooms, and then you get started on number 1, and then I'll help you if you have any questions, and I'll just go room to room to room. Assuming that, yeah, there we go. And I'll just add some extra breakout rooms in case some people join us. Or some of you have covered these. Now, because you don't have a calculator, I like to do these questions like this. So the first thing I do is subtract 6 and I get 4. Now, instead of finding out that x is 4/5, which a lot of you do because you've been trained since you were 2 years old to find x and plug it in. That's what they teach you to do in every geometry class and every algebra class and blah blah blah. Well, the relationship I see is to double both sides and get 8, and then add 3 to both sides, and then I get 11. So I get 10x plus 3 equals 11, and so that's my answer. Now, that strategy, you might say, oh, I don't like that strategy. I don't want to use that. I'll just figure out that it's 4/5, and then I'll come over here and plug in 4/5, and then multiply, and I see that 5 goes into 10 twice, and then I have 2 times 4 plus 3. It works too. So there's nothing wrong with that strategy at all. Sometimes I will say that it's faster not to find x. In this case, it's probably, no different either way. Okay, so how many, did you just plug in answers? Or did you actually went through you multiplied this one by 2 and got 2x, 2y, and 0, and then added them together and got 5x equals 10, and then found out that x was 2, and then you noticed that only one of them had an x value of 2. Is that what you did?
Mm-hmm.
It works. It works. So you could do elimination. Several of you like to, on those particular questions, will start plugging in values to see. It couldn't possibly be the letter A because the very first equation says that the two numbers have to add up to 0. So you could at least get rid of that choice and also that choice because they don't add up to 0. So it really was down to B and C if you were doing a plug and chug method. Question 3. So what does the number 12 mean in this situation? 12 is obviously connected to something that changes. So what did you guys say it was? Any thoughts? Come on.
This one I thought it was a...
You are correct. $12 per hour for each landscaper. So since N is the number of landscapers and H is the total number of hours they worked, we have to be able to figure out how much money that we had to pay all of the landscapers. So we needed to know how much money they each made. So good. Question 4. I was working with one of you, and what I tried to get you to do was focus on just even the first, okay? If you take something to the 4th power, right? So, I'm never going to write this out in reality. And maybe I should just worry about doing the firsts and not worry about the other part. If you're doing this, or if you at least think through this, 9a times 9a times 9a, you end up with a much bigger value than 9a to the 4th. Now, you would get a to the 4th, but you would not get 9a to the 4th. 81 squared. 81 squared. Is that 6561? I believe it is. But, yep, I got it. 6561. So too big. So by process of elimination, just looking at this and raising it to that power, you should be able to say, oh, that's 81a to the 4th. 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3, that's going to be 81a to the 4th. And so there's only one where you take the 3a squared, and when you square it, you end up with 9a to the 4th. So you wouldn't have to do all the foiling. You could just look at the first only. Sometimes I'll use the last or something like that. I don't necessarily need to do all the foiling to kind of rule out the bad choices. And yes, anybody have any better idea, like taking a square root? Some of you might do something like that on the ends, and that would give you these two values right here. That would depend on whether you knew you were dealing with a perfect square. But it is definitely a strategy. Stop me if I go too fast through something. So or circle that problem, and when we get back into time where we're working, where you're working on your own, if you want me to go back to a question, I'll be happy to go back to it and help you. So if k is greater than 0 and x equals 7, all right, so let's see here. X is, so 2k squared plus 17, take the square root, minus 7 equals 0, so hopefully you pushed that to the other side. And by the way, we are recording all this stuff, and now I'm not recording the individual parts where you and I are going over it, although maybe I should. I want to record. I don't want you to feel like you're embarrassed, like you can't ask me a question. So that's why I don't typically record stuff where it's just you and me one-on-one conversation. So squared both sides, subtracted 17, that's 32. Divide by 2, and I find out that k squared is equal to 16. How come the answer is not negative 4?
It has to be greater than 0.
Good. They told me that k has to be greater than 0. Now, I know the other reason you could tell me is, Mr. Staley, it's multiple choice. Negative 4 isn't even listed. Well, I understand that, but in the non-multiple choice, you might run into that same thing, and they always do this kind of stuff where they tell you information to rule out bad choices. So you got to pay attention to that information. Several of you asked me about this question, and several of you we concluded that you ended up with doing that stepping process twice and getting a p-value of 10. So many of you got that one right when we did it together. Yeah, that was a popular question. Question 7. I did this with one person, so we should subtract those. This is usually a question that a lot of people have. Now, did you guys see this information right here, a plus b and a minus b? When you see that information, what does that make you think of? Does anybody think of factoring? Because don't tell me they all have their microphones muted. They better not all have their mic. Oh, 3 of them do. Now, is there a reason you have your microphones muted? Like, is there like a huge amount of noise in the background that you are preventing us from hearing because your dog is barking? Or
Mostly just loud family.
Loud family. Hey, I understand that. I do. I get it. I lock myself in a cave, usually in the morning at 7:45 when none of you wants to get up, and I'm teaching class. I'm in my minivan. Yes, I'm in the minivan of my garage because it's the quietest place in my house. And I don't have a really big house, so everybody else that might be sleeping because they get up at like 9 o'clock or 8:30 or 8 o'clock, depending on the day. Anyway, I just don't want to bother them. And I'm sure you understand that on days where you don't have something right away. A squared minus b squared, that's equal to 16. When you're dividing like bases, you subtract the exponents. So what I'm hoping that you see is that's a difference of perfect squares, and it can be factored. And they already gave me that a plus b is equal to 2. So a little bit of division shows me that a minus b has to be equal to 8. Did I lose anybody in that process? If I did, let me know. This would be a good time to let me know if I went too fast through something. Because typically a lot of people ask that question. Okay. If we're silent, that means I'm moving on. If you want to save your question for later, feel free. Okay, so what do we do here? If the measure of an exterior angle of a regular polygon is greater than 50, okay, so let's try 51. Oh, wait a sec, we don't have a calculator. Maybe I should try just 50. Or maybe I should try 60. 60 is greater than 50. So what do you get on the one on the bottom when you divide out the 60? What do you get? Hopefully you understand that it's 6. And when you do it up there, 5 goes into 36 7 times with a little bit extra. You end up getting something like 7.2, but you know it's higher than 7. So we're talking about something between 6 and 7.2. So my answer is 7. That's the greatest number of sides it can have. Now, could it have less than that? Sure, it can have less than that. Anytime that exterior angle, that's a kind of an important formula to kind of remember. Now, for those of you who don't remember, when you're dealing with a polygon, the exterior angle sits outside here, outside the shape. You've got your interior angle and your exterior angle, and those exterior angles always add up to 360. So no matter what regular polygon you're dealing with, and I would remember that formula because I don't think they list that in the beginning information on the SAT. That might come into play or come in handy to know that they all add up to 360. Okay, question 9. The graph of a line in the xy plane has a slope of 2 and contains the point 1, 8. The graph of a second line passes through. Okay, I better start drawing here. Slope of 2 contains the point 1, 8. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 8 has a slope of 2. Okay, so if it has a slope of 2, that point's on the graph at 0, 6, and negative 1, 4, and negative 2, 2. So those points are all on the line. Not a very good line, but the graph of a second line passes through the points 1, 2, and 2, 1. So it would also pass through 0, 3, and 1, and negative 1, 4, and so forth. So if the two lines intersect at the point A comma B, which is that right there, that's negative 1, 4. What do you get when you add them together? You get 3. So my thinking is to be a little bit careful when you graph it and just use the slope and kind of count until you find the point where they cross. Did anybody else do something fancier than just graphing it? I mean, I'm sure we can come up with equations of lines and substitute, but I think it would take too much time. Did anybody do anything differently?
No,
Okay. As long as you're careful, because they don't provide a graph for you, as long as you're careful, I think you'll be fine. Question 10. Which of the following equations has a graph in the xy plane for which y is always greater than or equal to negative 1? Well, y is greater than or equal to negative 1 is a line. It's a horizontal line. So we're basically saying we can't have any points that hit that line or go below it. I should say go below it because it says equal to. So now, how many of you laughed when you saw the last answer? I hope you did, because the last one obviously is a picture that looks like this. It's going to have a lot of points below that line. So that's not reasonable. And then you've got a parabola that's been moved 2 units to the right. Well, ding, 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 that's the one, isn't it? Yeah, because the other two have been shifted down 2 units. So they're always going to have some points below that line. So it is letter choice C. Any questions on that?
No.
Okay. Yeah, if I know you guys have, if you've studied Algebra 2 and above, you will have talked about shifting quite a bit. Okay, question 11, one of you asked me about this one, and yes, we are taking 3 minus 5i over 8 plus 2i and multiplying by the conjugate of the denominator, which in this case would be 8 minus 2i, top and bottom. Okay, now, I'm a big fan of boxes, but many of you hate boxes. You like to draw with arrows. I don't care whether you know which way you do it, as long as you do what your favorite one is. Hopefully you know what I squared is. You guys remember what I squared is?
This becomes a negative.
It is -1. Okay, so whether you like to do boxes or not, like I've got 24 here, and then a minus 6i, and then a minus 40i, and then a positive 10i squared, but positive 10i squared is really the same thing as a negative 10. So the top of this fraction looks like this, 14 minus 46i. The bottom of the fraction, when you do 64 minus 16i plus 16i, yes, those i's are going to cancel out, and then minus 4i squared, that's really the same thing as plus 4. So this gives me a denominator of 68, but none of those answer choices looks like that. So what did they do to figure out, what did they do to get one of those answer choices?
They got rid of the i's on the bottom.
They did get rid of the I from the bottom, but every choice in every A, B, C, or D, all of them have the I's gone from bottom. So which one of those answer choices matches this?
It would have to be A or C, so it's C.
Correct, with the minus. Definitely minus in the middle, so it has to be A or C. But look at they took a 2 out of everything. That's why C is the correct answer. So they just reduced it. That's all they did. Now remember, you can use that screenshot if you need to save the stuff that's on screen because you didn't want to write as fast as I was putting it on screen. So if you ever want to use that save feature, you hit the annotate button and then you're safe. Just puts it in a nice folder for you if you want it. One of you asked me about this, but guess what? Lots of you asked me about this one. Oh, we need to take a 5-minute break. So go to the bathroom, walk around, get a drink of water, and then come back and we'll get back on question 12. So I'm going to pause the video, and this particular question involves cross multiplication. And so if I cross multiply this, and by the way, they are asking me to solve for f. When it says solve for the favorable reviews, that's f. And if I cross multiply this, I get f equals r times n plus f. So if we have f on both sides, so we are going to have to distribute that, rn plus rf. The problem is we've got f's on both sides of this equation. So we need to get the f's over on the same side. F minus rf equals rn. Anything that's got an f in it is considered a variable term. What can I factor out of these two terms that I circled in black? What can I factor out of the one person out there that's listening to me?
Um,
What do they have in common?
can you factor out F?
You can, and if you factor out an F, you get 1 minus R equals Rn. Now, out of your answer choices, A, B, C, or D, which one is solved correctly for F?
B.
Correct. B is the one. All they're doing is they're dividing by 1 minus R on both sides. And that's how that letter F gets by itself. So it's just cross multiplying, but then you're obviously manipulating a little bit. You're using the distributive property backwards. Most people don't usually think of factoring out something, but that's the distributive property, just in reverse. And if you want a screenshot, take a screenshot, but I am recording it. Okay, question 13, the sum of all the values of m. So let's see here. So first thing I would do is I would divide everything by 2 because I want my numbers to be as small as possible. And I know a lot of you are going to say, well, can I factor this? The answer is no, it's not factorable. So what's your backup plan? What are you going to do to solve this if you can't factor it? And don't tell me complete the square, because I highly doubt many of you are going to try to complete the square. So what's your other plan?
Can you square root it?
You cannot take the square root because we have a middle term, a linear term in the middle. So nice try there. What else can we do to solve a quadratic set equal to 0? If I use the letters QF, does that help? Quadratic
equation.
Yeah, that quadratic formula or quadratic equation, right. Okay, so in the quadratic formula, the discriminant, b squared minus 4ac, this thing sits underneath the radical. What is that? 64 take away 16. How much is 64 take away 16? Well, 64 take away 10 would be 54. Then 54 take away 6? 48. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's the part underneath the radical in the quadratic formula. And of course you have the opposite of b, plus or minus, and all that good stuff, all over 2 times a, which is just 2. Okay? Now, I'm wondering if you know, and I hope you know, that one of the answers is 8 plus radical 48 over 2, and the other answer is 8 minus radical 48 over 2. Does everybody kind of understand that that's what those two answers are? It's asking me for the sum of these two things, so I'm going to be adding them together. So here's my question. What happens to the positive radical 48 and the negative radical 48 when I add them together?
They cancel each other out.
They make no impact whatsoever. Do you guys know what 8 over 2 is? 4, and here's another one, 8 over 2. So if you know what 4 plus 4 is, you know the answer to this question is letter D, 8. So I guess my question is this. How important was it for me to figure out the discriminant? Or was it a waste of my time? It was a huge waste of time. Now, I know that you guys don't see questions like this except for the SAT, but as soon as they asked me to add them together, that plus and that minus are going to cancel each other out. So don't even worry about this part. You know, we're worried about focusing on this part and doubling it, basically. So I know lots of students would find the discriminant on that question and not need to find the discriminant. Question 14. Radioactive substance decays at an annual rate of 13%. Okay? What a lot of students don't realize or remember is that we always start out with 100%. When you're talking about percentages, and I don't care if we're talking about the price that something is at a store or the population of people, or in this case, a radioactive substance. But if you're going down by 13%, what percentage are you at?
87%.
You are at 87%. Now, I'm hoping that you guys looked at answer choice C and D and thought, well, those are ridiculous. A growth factor of 325 means it's going up by a lot. It's not even, it's not going down at all. Which answer choice is left that makes sense? Remember, we're talking about something that A times B to the X, where A is the amount that you start with and B is your growth factor. Which answer choice makes sense, A or B?
A.
It has to be A, right? Because it has the 87% growth factor in it. Now, some students are going to fall for this one because they see 13%, but that's actually an 87% decrease. So quite a bit different than going down by 13%. Sometimes they have really bad fake answers, and sometimes they have good ones. Okay, the expression 5x minus 2 over x plus 3 is equivalent to which of the following? Would you like long division, synthetic division, or the remainder theorem? Any choices out there? Anybody like long division? I'm going to guess no. What about synthetic division?
I think I remember synthetic. So yeah, I was going to say.
Okay, so synthetic division, I take the 0 that I get from the denominator. Does everybody understand the 0 is negative 3? If you don't, then what I'm saying is you would take x plus 3, set it equal to 0, and you could solve that to get the 0. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Now I need the coefficients across the top row. That would be 5 and negative 2. It's not a very long list for across the top. I always like to separate out the last one because the last one is my remainder. Well, according to synthetic division, we carry down the first one, and then we multiply the negative 3 and the 5, which would give me negative 15, and we put that in the next column over, negative 15, and then we add down the columns. So what is negative 2 plus negative 15?
Negative 17.
Negative 17. Do any of the answer choices look right? D is the one that's correct. Now, if you got your remainder at negative 17, keep in mind that that is over what you divided by. And then, of course, you have, after your remainder, you have your constant. Now, if you didn't like synthetic division, the other option I would give you is the remainder theorem. Now, I want to bring up the remainder theorem because I've seen it come up a few different times. And if you remember the remainder theorem, it actually might speed up the process. Maybe on this one, maybe not. So the remainder theorem says, take the 0 from the bottom and plug it into the top. What is 5 times negative 3 minus 2? Well, hopefully you would say negative 17. And the reason I think that's critical is hopefully you would see right there is the remainder negative 17. So the remainder theorem or synthetic division would show you pretty quickly what the answer to this question is. Any questions on that one?
No.
Okay. Okay, so now we're into the Non-multiple choice. Sales manager of a company awarded a total of $3,000 in bonuses to the most productive salespeople. The bonuses were awarded in amounts of $250 or $750. If at least one $250 bonus and at least one $750 bonus were awarded, what is one possible number of $250 bonuses? Well, if you've got $3,000 and you give away one $750 amount, how much do you have left? It's got to be more than 2,000. Yep, you'd have 2,250. Now, if you took that 2,250 and you divided it up into $250 increments, how many different awards could you give out? Well, every 4 awards that you give out is another $1,000. So this would be 9 different awards. Because every 4 you are giving out $1,000. That is one correct answer to this question. But what if I decided to do 2 of those $750 awards? If you take $3,000 and take away $1,500 because you gave 2 of those awards out, how much are you left with? I really hope you say $1,500, right? So if you do $1,500 and you say, I'm going to split that up into $250 increments, you get 6 of them. Well, what if I said, I want to take I want to give away 3 of those $750 awards. That's only going to leave you with $750 left, and if you take $750 and divide by 250, you get 3. So, what should I pick? What should I pick? 9. Is that the only thing I could pick? No. As long as you pick one of these, you are correct. These are the types of questions that some of you don't like because there are more than one possible answer. I know that some of you mathematical-minded people like there to be one answer all the time. You don't like it if there's another answer. But there are 3 different possible answers. As long as you pick one, you're good. Okay, question 17. We want to know the value of b. What part of this equation should I be focused on? Should I be focused on the squared part, the linear part, or the constant part? Which part should I focus on?
The linear.
Yes, the linear. So if I multiply 2x times 3x, that gives me 6x squared, so I don't care about that. But I do care about 2x times 5x because that's 10x. And when I multiply 3 times 3x, I get 9x. So when I add those together, what do I get? Well, hopefully you say 19x. So what's the answer for b? Remember, b is the coefficient of the linear term.
B is just 19.
19 is the correct answer. So I don't have to worry about the squared part. I don't have to worry about the constant part. I just have to focus my attention on the linear part, and you get part of the linear over here and part of the linear over here, and you just add them together. So nothing too complex. Those other parts are just distractions which would waste your time. Okay, question 18. What's so special since C and D are parallel? And I would always encourage you, when you have geometry questions, draw everything on the question that you can to help you. So, when you have those 2 lines that are parallel, what is that really helping you understand? What is that helping you understand about the two triangles?
That they are related?
Yeah, they're related. What's the word that we use? It starts with an S. It's obviously not congruent. Okay? Starts with an S and it ends with imilar. Nope, still nothing. I thought that was a good enough clue.
I don't know. It sounds anything to me.
Okay, so basically, if you looked at this triangle and spun it around, you could fit it inside here, and you could look at it as two triangles like this. Okay, now what they're trying to get at then is that the 5 and the 10 go together. And yes, these are going to be proportions. X and 8 go together. Now, keep in mind that they want to know what C to E is. So, even if we can cross multiply this and see that 10x is equal to 40, and so x is equal to 4, we don't want to put 4. What do we want to put?
12.
12. Okay? So, just in the geometry classes and geometry questions, always mix up whether they're asking you for x or whether they're asking you for something else. So you always have to pay attention. Okay, I found x. Is that what they're asking me for? Because if not, then this isn't multiple choice. You'll put down the 4, and I can see a lot of kids putting down the 4, and they were so close to having the right answer, but losing the credit, which they shouldn't have because they knew better. Guess what? Here's your first radian question. If you're not familiar with radians, I'll have to help you with it to kind of understand, but it's really not too bad. So in the xy plane, O is the center of the circle, and the measure of angle AOB is pi over A radians. So it's some fraction of pi. What is the value of A? So I'm going to zoom in on this particular circle to see if you recognize it. See if you recognize this triangle I'm drawing. Do you guys recognize that right triangle? I know it's not the most beautiful triangle in the world, but do you recognize what it is? It's okay to say no if you don't.
It's a special right triangle.
It is a special right triangle. Do you know which one?
Is it 30, 60, 90?
It is a 30, 60, 90. Now, for those of you that don't see what I'm talking about, in order to get to this coordinate, radical 3, 1, we would have to go radical 3 units to the right and 1 unit up. So the two side lengths, the legs of the right triangle, are labeled radical 3 and 1. Now, that is a recipe for, and if you don't know what the hypotenuse is there, you can do the whole 1 squared plus radical 3 squared. Squared. And then take the square root of that. You can do that. That's going to be 1 plus 3, which is 4, and the square root of 4 is just 2. So we can do this, but you're dealing with a 30, 60, 90 right triangle. That is a 30-degree angle in there. Now, if you know that 360 is the same thing as 2 pi, then we're trying to figure out how that 30 relates to radians. So if you know how to use the information at the beginning of the test to set up a proportion, now, is there any way that I can make my life easy here? Is there any way I can reduce any of this to kind of help myself? I mean, I know I'm going to cross multiply, but is there any helpful ways to make my life easier? Well, does 2 go into 360? If so, how many times? How many times does 2 go into 360? Maybe how many times does 2 go into 36? Yes, it'd be 180, okay? So if I do my cross multiplying at this point, that would be 180x equals 30 pi. And of course, then I would divide by 180 to get x by itself. Is there anything that goes into 30 and 180? Well,
30 goes into both.
yeah. Now, if you knew that 30 goes into both, that would make my life super easy because then I would have 6 on the bottom. If you did not know that, let's suppose you knew that 10 goes into the top and the bottom. Have you seen that trick where we cancel out the zeros? Really what we're doing is taking a 10 out of the top and the bottom, and then you could say 3 goes into 18 6 times. Now remember, they said that this is equal to pi over a, and they wanted to know what a is. So I'm really hoping that you know that a is equal to 6. Now, if you have had pre-calc or if you've had trig, then you know that a 30 degree angle is pi over 6 radians. So you would not have probably wasted your time doing this cross multiplying thing. But if you're in Algebra 2, you're not really familiar with your unit circle yet. So the conversion between degrees and radians isn't just like jumping off, the tip of your tongue. So, but if you knew it was pi over 6, obviously you would have said the answer was 6. Otherwise, we have to do that little cross multiplying thing, and we don't have a calculator, so we have to reduce it on our own. Okay, question 20. In the system of equations above, a and b are constants. If the system has infinitely many solutions, what does that mean? Doesn't that mean that the lines have to be the same lines?
Mm-hmm.
And if they have the same lines, what do we know about slopes?
They're going to have the same slope.
They're going to have the same slopes. Okay? So that means that a over b has to be the same thing as what over what? Doesn't it have to be the same thing as 2 over 8? Otherwise, they're not going to have the same slopes. Now, I'm not saying that a is equal to 2 and b is equal to 8. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that a over b has to be the same thing as 2 over 8. So you can tell me that a over b is equal to what? Because they probably will want it reduced.
1/4.
1/4. Would they take 0.25? Do you think that that would be an acceptable answer?
Probably.
Not probably. They would. They definitely would take 0.25. Okay. There's it's a very finite terminating decimal, so it's an easy one. So they would definitely take 0.25. I don't think they would argue with 2 over 8, to be honest, but I'm guessing that they want it reduced. So I would suggest reducing it or putting the decimal so that you don't have any questions. But we'll try to speed through these. So, musician has a new song available for downloading or streaming. The musician earns 9 cents each time. So 9 cents each download. So it's either got to be C or D. Why is D a bad choice?
Because it's subtracting instead of adding.
Exactly. Somebody'd be really mad if it was letter D. You'd be losing money when you're trying to make money. Okay. Question 2. Quality control manager at a factory selects 7 light bulbs at random for inspection out of every 400. At this rate, how many light bulbs will be inspected if the factory produces 20,000 light bulbs? So it's a cross multiplying situation. Now, if you can see what number would you multiply to go from 400 to 20,000? What number would you multiply by?
500.
500, or would it be just 50? Because because you would add an extra 0 from that, and then 5 times 4 would give you the 20. So I think it's just 50. So if you use that same strategy to multiply by 50, I think it would be. Now I know you can do cross multiplication, and you got a calculator, so you can, you'll probably just speed it up with a calculator. But if you can see those little things, sometimes that's useful. And maybe you don't trust yourself. Maybe you want to just do it on the calculator anyway. I completely understand that as well. Since you have it, you might as well use it. One end of a spring is attached to a ceiling. When an object of mass m kilograms is attached to the other end of the spring stretches to a length of L centimeters, as shown in the equation above. What is m when L is 73? So they want me to plug in a 73 and solve for m. Okay. Talk about taking me back to Algebra 1. So subtract my 24. That gives me 5349. Is that right? And then I just divide by 3.5. 49 divided by 3.5. That's not jumping out at me. I better have my calculator turned on, otherwise I'm not going to be able to answer that question. What'd you guys end up with?
14.
14 is correct. Good job. I'm just doing that simple division. Once again, let me know if I go too fast through something. I know some of these are easy, but I just don't want to go too quickly through something. The amount of money a performer earns is directly proportional to the number of people attending the performance. The performer earns $120 at a performance where 8 people attend. How much money will the performer earn when 20 people attend? So $120 for 8 people. So how much is the performer going to earn for 20 people? So 20 times 120 divided by 8. I ended up with 300 just doing the cross multiplication. Does that seem pretty straightforward? Okay, any questions on that? I'm just multiplying and dividing. Okay, question 5. The performer uses 43% of the money earned to pay the costs involved in putting on each performance. The rest of the money earned is the performer's profit. What is the profit of the performer makes at the performance where 8 people attended? So when you have 8 people attended, you start out with $120, but then we're going to multiply it by something. So if you have to give up 43%, what percentage do you get to keep?
57%.
That's 57%. And so what decimal are you going to multiply by? 0.57, because you just change it from a percentage to a decimal. Type it on the calculator and you get $68.40. And if any of you are coming up with a faster way or a different idea or something that helped you, don't feel bad about saying something, because I always like to see what other people are doing. Besides guessing. Guessing is not my favorite thing in the whole wide world. Now, if you get it down to 2 choices and you guessed, then I totally understand that strategy. There is no penalty anymore on the SAT for guessing. So please don't leave things blank. Guess. There's no penalty whatsoever for guessing. Question 6. When 4 times the number x is added to 12, the result is 8. What number results when 2 times x is added to 7? Okay. So if I subtracted the 12 to the other side, that would say 4x equals negative 4. I'm going to guess that most of you just divided by 4, got negative 1, and then plugged it in here. Is that what happened? Yeah, I'm guessing most of you did that. See, I was trying to come up with some cool strategy, but, taking the 4x and dividing by 2 and then adding 7. I highly doubt many of you would think of that strategy. Most of you, at that point, when you're so close, you don't have fractions. It's a nice whole number to deal with. You're just going to plug it in and move on.
For this one, I really didn't write anything down. I just kind of mental mathed it.
Mental mathed it? So you pretty much just did everything I just did? Seriously, I understand that. These are nice numbers. So I completely understand mental mathing that one. That's a good way to say that too. Okay, question 7. We want to know which one of these equations shows the x-intercepts. So, in order to show the x-intercepts, what are you looking for? I'm looking for something that's in factored form. Which one of those answer choices is in factored form?
C and D.
C, not so much, but definitely D. D is in factored form, so that's the answer to our question. Now, what if I changed this question? What if I changed this question, and instead of x-intercepts, what if I said, find me something that shows the vertex? Then D would not be the answer. What would you pick? Which one of those answer choices would be right if I was asking for the one that shows the vertex? Do you see it in letter B? Your vertex is 3, negative 1. 3, negative 1. Now, so if I can just see them asking a different question like that, and you needing to be prepared to look for the vertex. Okay, question 8. A few more before we end for the evening. In a video game, each player starts the game with K points and loses 2 points each time a task is not completed. If a player who gains no additional points and fails to complete 100 tasks has a score of 200, what is the value of K? How much did he start with? Any ideas?
400.
You are correct. We started with 400. All we do is add the 200 to the other side. We had to start with 400 because we lost 200 points. Oops. Where am I going here? Question 9. What does x plus y represent in this problem? X be the number of 40-pound boxes, and y is the number of 65. So what does x plus y represent? Is it weight? Is it money? Is it the number of boxes?
It's the quantity of the boxes.
It's the number of boxes, right? So I know that it either has to be A or B because I need something that has x is less than or equal to 45 boxes, or x plus y. I can't have more than 45 boxes. So these last two choices are ridiculous. Now, out of those two choices, which one is correct?
Would be A.
It is A, right? Because the certain boxes weigh 40 pounds and other boxes weigh 65 pounds, and we're going to add them together. we want less than or equal to 2,400 pounds. If we go over 2,400 pounds, we have damaged our forklift because it won't work. Sometimes we can get rid of bad choices pretty quickly. So a lot of kids stare at this question. So I'm going to rewrite it a little bit, and I'm going to ask you this question. They want to know, what is f of g of 3? Does anybody know what g of 3 is? 2. 2. Yeah, you can see it right there. It says g of 3 is 2. So now we just changed the question. We just changed the question to f of 2. And what's the answer?
B.
It is letter B, 3. So, kind of working our way out. We started with the part on the inside, and then we kind of worked our way out to get to the correct answer. Does that make sense? Does anybody have a question about that composition notation? Okay. Question 11. Number of hours Tony plans to read the novel per day. I noticed that some of this information is going to be useful and some of it's not going to be useful. They tell me something really important right here. They tell me how many words Tony can read every minute. But they never tell me how many pages he can read, let's say in an hour or anything like that. So this information in there is useless to me. Now, what is 349,168 pretty close to? Any thoughts what it's close to?
350,000.
So don't squabble over individual, words. Let's just make it nice because they were generous to us. They made it. Tony's words per minute is 250. And when you do that, you get so we know that it's not exactly 1,400. We know that it's close to 1,400. Okay, now that's the number of minutes that it's going to take him to read this book, approximately. So, how do we convert that to hours? What do we divide by? What do we divide by to change it from minutes to hours?
60.
60, right? And that tells me that we have 23.3 hours that he's going to read this book. But Tony plans to only read about 3 hours per day. So if I divide that by 3, I get 7.7 repeating, which means it's going to take him 8 days to do this book. So I didn't use the number of parts in the volume. I didn't need the number of chapters in the volume. I didn't do it. I didn't need any of that information. I really needed to focus on just certain pieces of info here. Any questions on that one? Okay, so we are going to get together next Tuesday, same time, same channel, 5:30 to 7:30. And we'll be back online. There should be, do you guys use your Google Calendar?